You know, finding a good wireless mouse is actually pretty easy these days. There are so many wireless mouse on the market right now that are good, or at least decent, that it's actually getting kind of difficult to buy a mouse that's straight up bad. If you stick to the popular options, that is. I'm not talking about some of the wild stuff you can find on AliExpress. I'm talking about mice that are actually getting good reviews, like the Razer Viper V3 Pro, for instance.
Viper V3.
Razer Viper V3 Pro.
Highly praised, frequently recommended, and rightfully so, because it is good. If you don't want to dig deep into the topic and just want a good and lightweight wireless mouse, this is an easy recommendation. The shape works for most grip style, like conventional claw, palm or even fingertip grip, and the tech is good too. Really not a lot to complain about with this mouse. However, this could not be my personal endgame mouse. While it's good, it's definitely not the perfect mouse. It's a good compromise for sure, but in a lot of areas it gets outpaced by other mice. So let's actually talk about some of the mice that I tested and that I think are superior in a lot of aspects. Like when it comes to the shape of the mouse and how it works for different grip styles, the technical stuff like the wireless stability, and the weight and build quality. So let's start with the weight. Like sure, the Viper V3 Pro is a light mouse. It's just shy of 55 grams, which, no question, is pretty light for a medium-sized mouse with no cutouts on the shell. But that's also kinda average now. Lots of premium wireless mice fall into the mid 50 grams range. The Wyzol OGM Pro V2 or the small and medium-sized Pulsar X2H weigh about the same. The Ninjutsu Sora V2 though, I don't know how they're pulling this off, but this mouse sticks out from the rest. It just weighs 42 grams. That's with reasonably sized scales and not a single cutout in the shell. And yeah, that's quite a bit lighter than your average mid 50 grams mouse, and you can feel that. Like 42 versus 55 gram doesn't sound like a huge difference, but that's almost a third more weight. That's definitely noticeable when accelerating or stopping the mouse. I'm playing on a pretty low sense of about 58 centimeters per 360, so I'm really glad for every single gram that can be saved. But yeah, low weight sometimes comes at a cost. Like Pulsar, for instance, had to put holes in the bottom plate to save some weight, and the structural integrity of the X2H, particularly that of the mini version, does suffer a bit. It's not only creaking, but also flexing ever so slightly. Mind you, I'm applying much more pressure here than I would ever do while gaming, and more than I probably should. So yeah, this is not something I notice while just using this mouse, no creaking or flexing there, but there is something to be said for super solid mice that are built like a tank, like the Zowie U2 or the XES by Vexi. Both come in at around 61 grams, but for that little extra weight you're getting exceptionally solid mice. These two definitely are my favorites when it comes to build quality. Personally though, I have to say I'd rather take a mouse like this that has a bit more flex but is about 7 grams lighter over a heavier mouse that's super solid. But that might be different for you. Interestingly enough though, of all things, it's the Sora V2, the 42 gram mouse that feels almost as solid as the Vexi XES and the Zowie U2. It's really not too far off, which is kind of mind-boggling if you think about the weight difference. Now, weight and build quality all well and good, but the single most important property in my opinion is the shape of the mouse. Like, if it doesn't fit in your hand, doesn't work with your grip style, or makes your wrist hurt after a few minutes, you're not gonna perform well with this mouse, no matter how light or well built it is, or if it has the newest flagship sensor. Doesn't matter. Now, getting a mouse with a more universal shape that works for a lot of people and different grip styles is a valid option. And the mice that I think have the most mass appealing shapes are the Wyzol OGM Pro V2 and the Razer Viper V3 Pro. I guess the Logitech Pro X Superlight is also worth mentioning here. What makes these shapes work for so many people is the side profile. If you overlay both, the Viper and the OGM actually look extremely similar from the side, and this profile just works great with the most common grip styles and a variety of different hand sizes. What's different between the Viper and OGM though is that the OGM actually is an ergo mouse and the Viper is your classical symmetrical mouse. Mind you, the OGM has a very mild ergonomic shape, but I guess you could say it's the same mass appealing profile, just with a little ergo twist. However, this jack of all trades shape is also their biggest weak point. A mouse that's specifically designed for a grip style will always have an advantage. I'm using claw grip, so I need that palm support at the back of the mouse. On the Viper, for example, that area is relatively flat though. Compare that to the Pulsar X2H. The grip I can get here is much more secure and relies less on friction between the palm of my hand and the coating of the mouse. So my favorite two mice when it comes to the shape are the Pulsar X2H, but the mini version, and the Ninjutsu Sora V2. Both are fairly similar and work great for claw grip. The full-sized X2H also has a really nice shape with great palm support for claw grip, but I feel it's a bit too wide of a mouse, at least for my grip and hand size. So yeah, I really like the shape of the Sora V2 and the X2H Mini. Thing is, both aren't exactly the most impressive mice when it comes to the tech they're using. Like, both have the 3395 sensor, which is not the latest and greatest sensor anymore, and none of them have 8K polling. I mean, technically there's supposed to be an 8K dongle coming out for the Sora V2 eventually, but nobody knows when or if this is gonna happen. So for now, the Sora V2 basically is a 1 kHz mouse. And the X2H does have a 4K dongle you can pick up, but it kind of struggles to even reach 4 kHz. It's more like a 3.5K mouse and not very stable at that. So let's actually talk about the polling rate for a minute. You can expect Razer to have the best wireless tech and the most stable polling, given all the praise they're getting. And yeah, the wireless tech is good, but surprisingly, of all the mice I've tested, it's the Wyzol OGM Pro V2 that has the best, most stable and highest update rate. I mean, it's totally debatable how much of an impact this actually has on your gameplay, but I gotta say this level of stability is damn impressive for wireless 8K polling. And I might add that this is actually true 8K polling for the sensor and for the buttons, while the Viper has to drop the buttons to 2 kHz in its 8K mode. Vexy comes in third place right after Wyzol and Razer. It might not be 8K, but their 4K connection is super solid and even slightly over-delivers. That's why the graph is just a straight line here, as the mouse constantly sends more than 4000 updates per second. Sure, you don't need 4K or even 8K polling, and high polling rates are often a bit overrated and can sometimes even do more harm than good. I made a whole entire video about that. But yeah, having the option to use super stable 4 or 8K polling like this is kinda nice to have, mainly for the peace of mind. Like, if you're picking up a shiny new gaming mouse, it's kinda nice to know that it has some of the latest and greatest tech, right? That's what's bothering me a bit about the Sora V2 and the X2H Mini, my two favorite mice when it comes to shape. Rationally, I know that the 1K polling of the Sora is fine, and Pulsar's unstable 3.5K polling is probably fine too, but at the same time I wish these had the same wireless implementation of the OGM Pro V2. Like, even if it's not a lot, I might be leaving some performance on the table. If these two mice were using better tech, in theory the tracking accuracy and latency could be better than they are now. So let's talk some latency numbers. I know this contraption looks kinda rough, but it allows us to measure the true click latency. So the time it takes between making physical contact with the mouse button up until the PC can register a click. And yeah, it really doesn't come by surprise, but at the top of the chart there are two mice that run at 8 kHz. Notice though that the result of the OGM Pro V2 at the very top isn't actually a good representation of what you'll be getting in game, as this is only possible with a debounce setting of 0 milliseconds, which unfortunately causes some double clicking issues with this mouse. So you gotta use it with 1 millisecond of debounce delay, which in return adds about a millisecond of lag. And this makes it land right next to the Sora V2, the 1 kHz mouse. And the Pulsar X2H? Well, for some reason my X2H Mini is about half a millisecond slower than the full-sized version, which is a bit weird. And at 2 kHz, the latency of both versions is quite a bit lower than in the 4K mode. I retested the X2H 3 times, by the way, to make sure that these results are actually valid. So yeah, I guess I'm gonna be using the X2H at 2 kHz now instead of 4. Does the latency really matter though? I'd say yes, and also no. Of course you want your mouse to have the least latency possible, and of course mouse manufacturers should strive to get their mice as close as possible to 0 latency. But at the same time, I would not take a mouse over another one just because it has like 1 or 2 milliseconds less latency. As long as the latency is not worryingly high, the shape, weight or coating of the mouse are much more important. That being said, I'm still glad that mouse manufacturers are improving on this. Pulsar just released the X2H V3, essentially the same mouse as the X2H, but with better tech. a new sensor and improved wireless performance. There's also an 8K dongle supposed to be available soon. For now I can only test the 1 kHz polling with the standard dongle, but I can confirm that the wireless performance has been greatly improved over the old version, both in terms of latency and consistency. And that's great to see, but this also shows how small of an impact the sensor or polling rate stability actually have in the grand scheme of things. Like, there's no denying that this is the technically superior mouse, but I still prefer the X2H Mini with the older sensor and its wonky 4K implementation, just because it's available as a mini version and I prefer the shape. And despite having some flaws, this is a fantastic mouse. And this would be even slightly better when it gets the new sensor and wireless implementation. My favorite mouse though is the Ninjutsu Sora V2. It's even lighter than the X2H Mini, and the shape works even better for my grip and hand size, as it's a slightly longer mouse. So here are my personal top 3. All of the mice in 3rd place are just too good to put any of them in 4th place. And even a lot of the mice that I've tested that didn't make it to my top 3 are actually pretty good, to be honest. Like the Zowie U2 or the Vexi NP01S, for instance. Didn't meet my preferences, but I can see why people like these. So one of the biggest takeaways I got from testing all these mice is gaming mice have been getting kinda good. Which, you know, makes it easy to find a good mouse, but in a way this also makes it harder to find your personal endgame mouse. There are just too many good options. And most of the time it really comes down to just personal preference. Thanks for watching, bis zum nächsten Video.